Australia, a vast country with only 23 million inhabitants. Richard is going to be our guide as we visit the Buccaneer Islands, a region that is as inaccessible as it is hostile. In this harsh environment, there are men at work gathering pearl oysters. In the very heart of Australia, Dave and his family live on the edge of the Simpson Desert. Living conditions may be hard, but Dave has given his children the biggest sandbox in the world. Further north in Arnhem Land, on the land of their ancestors, Simon, Russel and Otto live their lives according to the aboriginal traditions, a life with no constraints except those imposed by nature.
Respect the land, you'll survive, you'll come back safely.
The Buccaneer Archipelago is made up of countless islands and islets stretched out over 1,000 kilometers. They are practically uninhabited. There are the rare navigators that pass through, but apart from them, the only other people that venture into this liquid labyrinth are the pearl farmers.
This is the Grumman mallard. These are our transport vehicles for around this wilderness area. So we're in a place where there is no access. We are 3.5 hours from Darwin by mallard, or 2.5 days by sea from Darwin. So without these transporters, we can't achieve our wonderful productivity. It's essential for us.
This is where we met Richard McLean. He came to Western Australia a good 20 years ago. He started out as a diver on a pearling lugger, a physically demanding job that he did for more than 10 years.
It's beautiful. And it's kind of peaceful at the same time too. If you take the time to stop and relax and listen to it, every time you come here in different light or different weather or different time of year, there's always something different that catches you, catches your eye, catches your imagination. I find it very inspiring. Probably not many other places in the world are so uninhabited and untouched. We're very lucky. Make it back for breakfast.
Richard could never bring himself to leave this region. Now he manages all the pearl farms for Paspali, one of the world's leading pearl companies. The story of these pearl oysters begins off the coast 300 kilometers south of the Buccaneer Islands. The divers first have to gather the wild oysters that will allow them to cultivate pearls. Tony Cook is getting ready for another dive. 20 meters down, the water is 19 degrees Celsius. The visibility is mediocre, but no matter, Tony has to dive.
Our fishing season starts around April and runs for anywhere up to 2.5 to 3 months. We take a team of divers up to 48. Paspali will take down the coast on up to half a dozen different motherships. We tow the divers, we call them drift divers. Drift diving, we tow them along the bottom where they're sole purpose of being down there is picking up the shell, the wild shell, and during the day the divers will spend up to 8 hours a day underwater using our device tables to ensure that we have no decompression illness.
Not only do the divers have to find the oysters, but they also have to keep a sharp eye out for the many dangers. Sharks and deadly jellyfish, for example. Tony earns a good living with this work, but it's quite risky. A few years ago, while he was working for another company, Tony witnessed a tragic event that deeply affected him.
There is some big fish out here. We have had attacks in the past. Probably, as I remember in my time, there's probably about half a dozen attacks and a fatality in '93, which was a mate of mine who got taken. The water was dirty, poor fizz, about less than a metre. and his dive buddy came up complaining of no air, got to the surface and the hose had been bitten in half. So he pulled the hose in with nothing on the end. About a week later we found his body in a shark that we caught. But yeah, it was pretty tragic for the whole industry and everyone involved. It's always in the back of your head, especially in dirty water when you're working zero visibility. I think it's like anything, once you've been doing it for so long, you just take it as part of your job.
Once the wild oysters have been gathered, they're brought on board the impressive boat lab, equipped with a sort of operating room. About 50 people live and work on board, 25 of them highly trained surgical technicians. This is a gold-lipped Pinctada maxima, more commonly known as the South Sea pearl oyster. As oysters go, it's huge and produces a brilliant nacre with a satin sheen. To produce pearls, they first have to gather wild oysters, then seed them in a top-secret operation that takes place behind this partition. Each oyster has to be delicately pried open in order to implant a nucleus, a small pellet of special limestone. The foreign body will remain inside for 2 years while the oyster coats it with nacre. Once the seeding is done, the whole crew is mobilized to put the oysters back into their natural habitat. Only now they're held in baskets so they don't drift off the current. For the first few months after the operation, the oysters are closely monitored. Every day, Tony and the other divers have to keep a watchful eye on their precious oysters.
We describe it as being an underwater labourer. The work itself is strenuous. It's like pushing a wheelbarrow underwater. Imagine that. We're in 20 metres of water most of the time, which is 3 atmospheres of pressure. So you've got those extra pressures on your body while you're working. You're lifting and carrying things unnatural ways. Yeah, you do get worn out quite quick.
Like a nurse at a patient's bedside, Tony has to make sure that the gold-lipped Pinctada maxima are recovering from their operation. It's tedious work alone at the bottom of the sea, and one has to be in excellent physical shape to be able to operate in such conditions. For Tony, the love of adventure and the rush of adrenaline are his life's blood. No, you're not seeing things. Tony is really toying with a sea snake. But he has to be careful, for one bite from this snake could be deadly. Luckily, Tony's wetsuit is thick enough to protect him from the lethal fangs.
It's just a passion for diving and being on the ocean. Yeah, came up this way surfing and fishing, and ended up jumping on one of the pearl boats to start with when I was a young fellow, and just pursued it. Been with it for nearly 20 years, so yeah, I've never had a bad day.
We're about to leave the operations grounds that we're at Sandy Point, and then head up into the Buccaneer Archipelago into Talbot Bay. It's going to be about a 16-hour run for us. We should be there probably tomorrow afternoon.
To get to Talbot Bay, our boat has to go north 300 kilometers, then round Cape Levesque, where it ventures into the labyrinth of the Buccaneer Islands.
There's thousands of islands, inlets, channels, great tides. It's uninhabited and it's just a fantastic area. The early morning light and the late afternoon light is when you see it at its best. It can look very harsh in the midday sun because it's a harsh environment. There's a lot of local knowledge required not only to safely navigate through these areas because they're poorly charted, but it's a beautiful area. It's beauty in its ruggedness, I think.
In this maze of land and sea, we see a few scattered installations. These are the pearl oyster beds. After recovering from their operation, the oysters spend close to 2 years here. It's a breathtaking spot and so isolated and remote that there's no pollution. Perfect for the oysters.
We're at Talbot Bay in the centre or in the heartland of the archipelago now. This is our Talbot Bay pearl farm. It's a floating pearl farm. 13 people live here. And look what's in here. Have a look at this. It's just an aquarium. It's fantastic. Bit of fishing to top the day off. Let's see how lucky we can be today. A lot of people, this is the reason they come to work here, so they can fish. It's more than a sport. It's a way of life for a lot of people fishing. Oh, yeah! There's a fish! And there's another one. Look, there's a croc coming in. Look at him. Very unusual for a croc to come in this close. You can jump clean into the boat without batting an eyelid. If you've ever gone on a jumping croc cruise like out of Darwin, it gives you one thing, you realise how high and how fast these crocs can jump. And you know, that's what everyone gets a bit sucked in about crocodiles, because they see them looking docile like that one is, just floating on the top of the water. But when he goes, you can see how fast he just comes in from out of nowhere.
Past 10 metres from their normal depth.
Watch out.
Just let him come in a bit. Oh, it's a cod. He's got the biggest one of the day so far.
Oh, it's a cod. It's a good cod too. He's quite a big croc, 3 metres or so. Get off there. Yeah. Just get off the edge of the boat.
He'll chomp you.
Come on.
There's a particular curiosity in this maze of channels that Richard wants to show us. The Australians call this phenomenon horizontal waterfalls.
Yeah, there's a lot of water trying to get in or out of these gaps, so it causes these eddies, whirlpools. It's a pretty, we're very lucky at the moment because it's almost slack water, but still there's this much turbulence. So you can imagine what it's like at flood tide. It's extremely dangerous. We wouldn't be coming through here in a flood tide. 24, 26 feet is the difference between high and low tide. And that amount of water coming through these tiny crevices and rock gorges and that, tremendous amount of energy, huge amount of water being moved. All that turbulence and water exchange also increases the amount of oxygen in the water for food life, for our pearl shell and for all other fish species.
In Vansittart Bay, a little further north, the pearl harvest has just gotten underway. For Richard and all his co-workers, this is a period of feverish activity. And now we'll finally get to see the fruit of all this effort. And they say it's never the same thing twice.
This shell now is probably 7 years old. It was 3 to 5 when it was fished on the Arnhem Land beach. It's had another 2 years grow out. And it's been cleaned more than 50 times in that 2-year period, carefully by our farm workers. And it was delivered to the ship last night, opened this morning, and there we have, beautiful pearl. Let's go upstairs and see what's come out of the harvest today.
To produce these little shimmering pearls, a whole battery of techniques and equipment has been mobilized. But without the natural nursery of the Buccaneer Islands, would these little gems attain this superb quality?
That's a beautiful pearl. You can hardly see the shoulders of this pearl. You look through them. We're very, very pleased. This is going to be a good harvest. To see such promise, such nice colour, nice clean pearls, nice shapes, this is exciting.
Richard has to take his precious cargo to Darwin. We'll take advantage of the seaplane to leave this magical spot. But Richard will soon be back here in this territory so removed from civilization.
Yeah, I've just picked up those boys. We're on our way back for a beer.
Copy that.
It's in about 20. And we're just on our way back to Mount Dare, which is at the top end of South Australia. We really are in the centre of Australia and on the western edge of the Simpson Desert. And this is just a sample of the great roads that we have around here. We're very isolated. 500k from Alice Springs, 1,300 kilometres from Adelaide. And Rock is a day's drive away, so we're sort of a long way from everywhere. We just get used to hundreds of kilometres when you drive.
Mount Dare Station, an unlikely settlement plopped down right on the edge of the Simpson Desert. It's one of those places where life makes a dogged stand. All around for 500 kilometers in any direction, there's nothing but sand and rocks. It looks like a scene out of Mad Max, but a lot less violent and a lot more laid back. Here in the middle of nowhere, but in the dead center of Australia, is where Dave has chosen to make his home along with his wife and children. He came here 7 years ago and took over a half-abandoned service station. Mount Dare Station is the only post for the brave souls venturing into the vast uninhabited and uninhabitable desert, where the temperature often gets up to 50 degrees Celsius. People never stay here long. They're just passing through.
Cooking breakfast 1 minute and then you're out fixing cars the next. Just then getting ready with the post, and some days can be flat out in here.
Dave is the only person you can count on if you get lost in this hostile environment. This spot does have the one natural resource that made it possible for Dave to settle here, a source of water. Everything else has to be brought in from the outside, and that means far away.
This is all the supplies we need to look after all the tourists that come through. And at this time of year, it's very busy, so as you can see, we've got quite a load on at the moment. Takes us about 7 hours in the truck. It's usually 2 nights in town. And yeah, then we get back here, unload it, rush off and go and do another job. You do have to plan well ahead, and if you forget something, well, it's weeks before you get it. And our vegetable supplier forgot our lettuces. No lettuces. That's it.
A round trip to the nearest store is a 1,000-kilometer expedition, half of it on god-awful tracks.
We don't really have a local trade. There are some cattle properties not too far away from here, but they're 70 kilometres nonetheless. That's over an hour's drive, so we don't often see the neighbours, and it's sometimes a special occasion when you do see them.
As for social life, aside from the passing travellers and the hired hand, Dave, his wife and children have only each other to talk to. And the kids can hardly invite friends over for their birthday parties. But the family has found a way of life that suits them just fine.
Here we got my wife Melissa and my two little angels. We've got the eldest one Charlotte and the little girl Crystal Ann. They love it. We've just come back from Alice Springs, where we've been to the Alice Springs show, so we've got the bubble machine and show bags and all sorts of stuff.
Ring Becky!
Just enrolled Charlotte. She's 3.5 for next year. She does kindergarten. It'll be correspondence through Alice Springs, and the year after that, then it'll be over the internet, School of the Year. They can see their teacher through via the camera on the internet, and they can do music, they can do dancing, painting, anything they can learn is on the internet, and they've got a 99.9% attendance rate. So, and it's the biggest classroom in Australia.
Just closing your eyes.
It is throughout outback Queensland, Northern Territory, South Australia, Western Australia. So it is just huge.
Charlotte's class, which has about 50 pupils, is the biggest in the world. It extends over a territory almost the size of a continent.
We're going out to the airfield to go and meet the plane. The plane brings the mail in every Wednesday, and they take one of these, all their outgoing mail, and we collect our incoming mail.
My name's Reg, and I fly the mail plane for Chartier, based out of Alice Springs. It involves delivering mail to remote homesteads, communities around the centre of Australia. This company has the longest mail run in the world. There are mail runs that 3 hours flying in a straight line to get to the first stop.
Morning. Good. And I've been preoccupied and forgot to bring you a drink out, but you're quite welcome to come over to the pub and grab one if you want one.
No dramas, just the one?
Yeah, just the one, probably 2 kilos.
Yeah, no dramas at all.
Everyone looks forward to mail day, and we'll sit around the table and divvy out all of the mail and work out who's been ordering the most things.
We have probably 9 mail runs on our books that go as far as West Australia, South Australia, and into northern Queensland. And it can take you all day, a good 8.5, 9 hours of flying to complete a mail run. And that's a pretty big day.
These postmen of the desert are the spiritual heirs of the early pioneering pilots. In spite of the long hours, the solitude, and the difficult conditions, they still nourish the dreams of many an Australian youth.
It's remote area flying. You're constantly over featureless terrain. It's pretty hard navigating out here. We rely on a GPS unit to get us from point A to point B. In the event that you do have an engine problem, we generally just pick a good place to put it down, and we've got supplies on board to last us at least 3 or 4 days, water and food, and we've got radios on board to attract the rescue crew if we need to. Quite fond of the red dirt, the Simpson Desert, the Tanami Desert. It's quite it's comforting. It's very interesting.
Oh, we've got to put the big wheels on, mate. We've got to go out in the desert for a couple of days, so I'm going to slot these on. This car's purpose is primarily to be a recovery vehicle. It goes out to do tows, pull people out of bogs, repairs, anything that needs doing around here. And I'm going to take my little girl away with me this time. Yeah, you going to stay in the swag?
Yes.
All right. See ya. See you in a few days. Bye. I'll get it in a minute. Ready for big trip? The kids really enjoy growing up out here. I just think it's a great environment for them. Charlotte really loves it. She loves camping. Really loves camping, sleeping in the swag and stuff, looking out at the stars through the open swag. Loves it.
"4 hours on the road, and the landscape is still the same. Dave doesn't get tired of it. He chose to live here in the company of these huge sand dunes.
Just being able to live and work in country like this is just special. You know, you don't want to be battling your way through traffic. I'd rather battle my way through sand dunes, you know. Yeah, we're going to camp just here, Charlotte. This be a good place for the camping. Yep. And to get. There you go. Get the camping stuff out now. Yeah. Oh. We're at Perny Bore, which is 65 kilometres to the east of Dalhousie Springs. And as the name depicts, Perny Bore, it is a man-made bore that has been turned into a wetland. They were looking for oil and yeah, all that came out of the ground was near boiling water. So they said, don't need this, and off they went, leaving it flowing at, you know, so many thousands of litres a second. You know, it was just amazing, the water that was coming out. It would have filled these swales here before it was capped and restricted in its flow to just keep it to a moderate flow to maintain the wildlife that had become dependent on it. To raise kids out here has been a great privilege. Just this morning, Charlotte gets out of bed and says, come on, Dad, let's go and find some camels. You know, how many other kids are going to get out of bed and say that in the morning? This is Australia's largest sand pit. She plays out here, you know, like any other kid plays in their backyard, but I just think the scenery around here is just a little bit more special than the average backyard.
Oh, okay. My scissors losing, Dad.
Kiss.
Oh, Dad, you know it's a sand pit.
Yeah, it's a big sand pit, isn't it? Can you see how they happen, all these little waves?
Yeah.
Right? They're pretty, aren't they? That's the wind that makes those. And the wind makes one little wave like this, right? And then eventually, this little wave will be as big as this sand dune. Because all these big sand dunes start off as little waves.
Star's gone.
Oh.
Where's the stars gone?
Died in the sky.
Oh, okay. And where's the moon? The moon's still over there, is it? What's that? Oh, righto.
Inside the circle, a fire. It's really hot. Hey, look, a spider. He's looking for his mum. He can't find her anywhere. Oh, no. I nearly touch him. He might hurt. Spider, just keep going to your mum.
When you're out in the Simpson Desert, you've got 300 kilometres of sand dunes, no habitation for 500 kilometres between Mount Dare and Birdsville. And it's the vastness that is out here, it's just undescribable. It's really something that you have to see to feel, I think. It's God's own country, you know. It's the colours around here, the beautiful rich reds are just fabulous. I love it. 6.5 years I wouldn't be here if I didn't like it. It's hard work, no doubt, but yeah, it's a great environment. It's peaceful. I just think it's great.
Arnhem Land is in the north of Australia. This vast preserved territory is a world of its own, like a state within a state. The entire territory belongs to the Aboriginal Australians, and any Australians who are not Aborigines have to get a permit to travel in this special land. In this breathtaking landscape, humanity's oldest civilization lives in harmony with the environment. For more than 40,000 years, the same people have been living on the same land here. At present, there are no more than 15,000 Aborigines living on a territory of close to 100,000 square kilometers.
My old people, ancestors, walked this country from thousands of years. And they left the old track here. This is tough country. You have to have a lot of knowledge to survive on this country. My father taught me how to live on country, and he learned from my grandfather. The knowledge has been passed on to this country.
In the heart of this peaceful landscape, we meet Otto Bulmania. He's a clan chief. According to tradition, each clan lives on its own territory and moves around according to the seasons. Before, when Otto's father or grandfather would roam with the family, they could easily cover more than 400 kilometers on foot on their clan's territory.
I'm the traditional landowner of this country here, as you can see. This is all my country, but you know, my great-grandfather and my father used to live on this country and do, you know, hunting and gathering around this area here. And now my father and grandfather gone. I am the traditional owner. I have to teach my kids to look after this country. We have like plenty, you know, billabongs, river, we go and, you know, catch fish, feeding our family. Sometimes we go up on the escarpment here and do like kangaroo fire drive, and we, you know, catch kangaroo, and sometimes we go out and do shopping in town, you know, like basic food that we get them, flour, tea, sugar, and we come back and stay in the bush.
Otto spends a lot of time roaming out in the bush, hunting or passing the traditional lore on to the younger members of his family. Here he's out with Russell, one of his nephews. In the 1920s, white farmers introduced water buffalo to northern Australia, and they have adapted very well. Too well, in fact. They've thrived so well that they've become quite harmful to the environment. Their hooves do a lot of damage to this fragile land, so their population has to be strictly limited.
Why?
This bull is really injured and it's really dangerous. It's on a scrub here somewhere, but you have to be careful.
There's no hunting season for the Aborigines. They hunt to live all year round according to their needs.
We eat a lot of bush meat. That's how we grew up here, and that's how we get like buffalo meat and kangaroo and bush turkey and all that. And there's a buffalo here, so I got them already. I think I might have a look what sort of meat I need, and I'll get it out as soon as I get it out. And I think that's our bush food. Sometimes we go out to the billabong. We had a lot of lilies in the billabong, but now it's all gone from the pig and buffalo. So we have to get rid of them all the time sometimes. Keep the number down and keep them out from the good place.
Living off the land also means protecting and taking care of it. It's a family affair, and each member has to do their part. Russell and his little brother Simon have gone out into the bush. They've been camping here for 5 days now. They call this a walkabout, a period of roaming without any specific destination.
The land, it'll take my breath away always. When I'm out in bush, it's really strong culture, and the way we sit around the campfire light, and yeah, I like it out here, and it's really beautiful, and the way you can hear the water, and it's really, really quiet, nice and quiet. And from where I'm sitting down here, I'll go to bed, and if I'm looking at the sky, I can see all them stars, a million stars all over me. It's beautiful.
A walkabout can last a few days or a few weeks. It depends on how the spirit moves them. They take their time to camp, hunt, and simply enjoy the landscapes. This is the normal life of the Aborigines.
You know, watch out for crocodiles in this water, for sharks. Some fish, yabby, stingray, and lots of sharks in this water. This is my mother country, you know. I used to live here with my grandfather, but he passed away a long time ago. Maybe 1 year back or something. I used to saw him spear a kangaroo on his country. He used to spear a wallaby with little wallaby. He used to bring back that little wallaby to me, and I grow him up. Oh, lots of people don't like that. They don't have the land. Just good life for us in this place. We like this place.
Bushfires raging out of control can be devastating for these parched lands. For ages, the ancestors of Russel and Otto have been using fire to fight fire, to avoid the extreme ravages it can cause.
It's fire season, and we're gonna burn the whole Arnhem Land. So everyone's lighting fire now in every stations, and people live in hunting area. They all burn all that stuff. So it's fire season.
Some area we live for long, 2-3 years, fuel load, we get big problem like big fire, and you can see a big black scorch mark right on the top. And for this sort of fire, it's a cool fire. And when we burn like this, a few days time, all the reshoot grass will come back, and then wallaby will come back, big buffalo will come back, wild cattle, and we can, spot them in a good place. It's very old system, like it's been from the very beginning, since our ancestors' time. They've been, putting the fire so that our ancestors warming themselves and feeding from fire. So it's really important, like fire gives us everything.
Russell's family appears out of the smoke. No GPS, no compass. The Aborigines can drive for hours way out in the bush and find exactly what they're looking for. They've dropped in to spend the evening with Russell, which means getting dinner for 10 extra people. But that doesn't seem to worry Russell. While Russell goes off hunting, Otto makes ready for the evening's festivities.
This is woolly bark, and I can listen that is bit hollow here. So there must be good ditch. This one.
The didgeridoo is the musical instrument of Arnhem Land. Everyone knows how to play it around here. This instrument plays a vital role in the Aboriginal culture. They use it for their ceremonies, as well as for an evening of just singing around the campfire. To make a good didgeridoo, the recipe is quite simple. You just have to carefully select a tree trunk that's been perfectly hollowed out by termites.
And I got a lot of family, just came up for visit. So I think I need to get a lot of meat a little bit and take it back, and we'll cook them around. And I think we'll sit around the campfire. Saturday night out. That's a family night to enjoy eating and have fun and talking each other. And I think we're gonna have a big feed and wash our hands, and I think go to bed.
Hunting and gathering are two cornerstones of the Aboriginal culture, a way to stay in touch with the land.
Our land, it's really like, it's all about culture too, and like ceremony and stuff. And we don't want to damage any of our land, because we like living like this. And we like collecting all the bush food, and you can feel the everything that's got in the earth. Dân này vào. Đây đẹp. Cái đầu.
In the Aborigine tradition, these are called song lines, litanies chanted in a language no one can understand, but they are essential. The Aborigines say that it's the language of animals. One song line will describe the course of a river and all the wildlife that lives there. Another will retrace the limits of a specific territory and the animals that inhabit it. Each one of these songs is an element of the Aborigines' history and describes a piece of territory. The song lines are, in fact, the proof of ownership of a family clan, something like an official land deed, and the totality of these song lines form a sort of land registry plan.
This is like my grandfather's wet season camping area. During floodwater, he used to come and camp here for black wallaroo, for hunting kangaroo. There's no any car track, pretty rough country. It's a middle of nowhere, and you can find them this sort of painting around this everywhere.
All these oral and pictorial traditions go back to the dawn of time. They're a way of transmitting information, and even though they're not written, they're just as precise. For Otto and all the Aboriginal Australians, the history of their people is made up of a succession of personal anecdotes.
If I'm walking on other man's country, I don't tell the story because I don't speak the language. New people always sit quiet when it's entering other man's property, and always sit quiet because you don't know what's the story behind you. But if you living on your country, you can tell them big mob story. You can tell them about, oh, let's go and hunting there, or let's have ceremony up here, and all the family, like country, make us talk, and it's there alive. It's watching us. If we make one mistake, we get sick because old people's spirit are watching us, and if we can't do proper way by respecting the land, we get sick, fall from rock or big ironwood tree, goes through our feet, and there's a lot of dangerous part. So respect the land, you'll survive, you'll come back safely.
The Aboriginal people of Australia have managed to survive much longer than any other civilization on Earth. And the key to such longevity surely lies in the great respect that they show towards their land and the creatures that live there. Somewhere on Earth heads for the east coast of Australia, famous for its 10,000 kilometers of breathtaking coastline and for the boundless swell of the Pacific Ocean. Its shores also count 12,000 islands, islets, and keys, less well known but just as magnificent as their big sister, the island continent. For Darren, Lossy, and Claire, Eastern Australia is a wild, alluring El Dorado, and they're going to let us in on some of its secrets. From the history of its first inhabitants to the cutting edge of climate research, each one is fighting to protect a heritage that is as fragile as it is majestic. North Stradbroke Island, just a few kilometers from the glass and cement skyline of the Gold Coast, seems like an interlude preserved from human folly. It is a land apart. It belongs to no one, but the Quandamuka Aborigines definitely belong to this island. Darren Burns is one of the 150 Aborigines that live here.
Quandamuka, we are the people of the land and sea. But you cannot say we feel more of one than the other. We live on an island, so we're surrounded by sea, so obviously we're saltwater people. But we need fresh water to survive. So the land part of our island gives us the fresh water, the food and the vegetation, the fauna and flora, and the spiritual entities that are surrounding us everywhere we go on this island, whether that be in the water or on the land. See, so that's our resource from the beach. See, we eat them. So you can eat that. Very nice.
Darren watches over his island and its treasure. He is the head of the island's Aboriginal Rangers.
Well, we'll go up here and we'll see if we can find some roos behind the dunes. I'll just run up and see if there's any up there. One over there, look. So come this way now, come up on the high. There, just there, see the baby in its pouch? See the little one?
North Stradbroke Island is a paradise for kangaroos and koalas. There are no predators on the island, and a large part of it is a natural reserve.
This is food for the soul, for sure. It's therapy. It's what any traditional owner needs to be doing. It's having that satisfaction of knowing that they're looking after their country. I belong to this place. I don't belong to somewhere 100,000 or 1,000 miles away. I belong right here. So this is where I'm strongest, and I work from my strength and the strength of my people. We know it's our place. Nobody can tell us any different.
The arrival of the British colonists at the end of the 18th century marked the beginning of the massive expropriation and acculturation of the Aborigines. Darren has been fighting for the recognition of Aboriginal rights for over 30 years. July 4th, 2011 marked a new page of their history. The federal court returned a large part of the island and the management of its resources to the Quandamooka people.
I didn't experience and suffer racism and discrimination as badly as the generation before me. You know, things are getting better as civilization, you know, the establishment becomes more civilised. You know, they've been uncivilised and treated Aboriginals poorly in the past, but it's getting better. So as such, the fire in my belly has been very strong, just from, you know, the injustice that our people suffered. But I see the young ones of today, the fire burns as strong in their bellies, but the young ones, their fire is born out of their pride in who they are.
The dark days of the island are a thing of the past, and the focus today is protecting this magnificent heritage that has been passed on to them. The island, called Minjerribah by the natives, is a dune covered by forest and a coastal wetland, the 18-mile swamp, the only one of its kind in the world. In the dry season, wildfires can cause irreversible damage and threaten to destroy this extraordinary ecosystem with its centuries-old trees. Darren and his crew take constant care of their ancestors' garden.
Our people in Australia and the Quandamooka country, we manage the bush with fire for thousands of years. So our people and the vegetation are attuned to one another, and the effects of colonisation interrupted the traditional practices of their aborigines, of our people. And really, this is a recommencement on a large scale of our people managing their country. Because for a lot of time we had no rights or no resources to do this job. Now we've got native title, we've got the rights and the resources and the ear of the government to support this work and to listen to Aboriginal land management aspirations and practices. And we're working together. That's the big important thing too.
Today's mission will be tricky. The Rangers are going to set a controlled fire.
No, just the other side of that dead wattle there, so you don't bite off too much, hey? Get it into there. We come inside that bark.
Darren trains the young people of the community to become Rangers. He passes on his know-how, a mix of tradition and science.
Yeah, come inside of there.
Uncle Darren, as he's known here, is a well-respected figure.
He keeps us at a pace that we wouldn't think that we could do. So at the end of the day, you'll work your ass off all day, and if it wasn't for him, you know, he's in his 50s now, so if he can do it for 8 hours straight, then so can us.
The Aborigines have been practicing controlled fires for thousands of years. It means managing the fire's temperature, direction, and amplitude. This technique favors certain species of trees and insects. Animals can move about more freely, the soil is nourished, and the bigger trees thrive. Most important, if a wildfire does break out, it spreads more slowly. Like in the summer of 2014, when North Stradbroke could have disappeared in an out-of-control bushfire. The Rangers finally managed to stop it. Now, the scars are nearly invisible.
malara, yola bariba. You're gonna reap a malara, yola bariba. You're gonna repoka, quanamokata. You're gonna repoka, quanamokata. You're right, oh, bamali maro. You're right, oh, bamali malara. You're right, oh, bamali maro. You're right, oh, bamali malara.
Craig Tapp teaches traditional Aboriginal arts. For a long time, the colonists banned any form of cultural expression. Without a written tradition, a great many native practices have been blotted from memory.
Who wants to colour in a dolphin? You'll be one ears at a time. Okay. You can colour in a dolphin because you've got smaller feet. What I've done is I've brought it along so we can do it as a communal thing for kids, to get them out of the classroom, to get them back out in nature, you know, to get them to touch the land again. And that when they do that, they something becomes. The glow in their face and their eyes, they just love. They love, as you can see, they love connecting back to Budjanjara, to Mother Earth. Yeah. So that's what it's all about. That's what kids are missing. They miss that spiritual side and connecting back with Mother Nature and Budjanjara. And once you touch her, once you feel her, and you make something beautiful and design, and you get this great sense of achievement. And yeah, the kids love it. Yeah. These colours that I use, the red is for the land, the black is for the people, the yellow is for the sun. The white is for Bayami, our creator. I've also, these are our two yuris, our two totems. You've got the dolphin and the snake in the centre, okay, which is land and ocean, which is one of the biggest things, messages we've got to get out there. It's very important to realise what we do on this earth reflects on the land, especially the land, reflects what happens in the ocean. So if we don't look after both of them, we could be in trouble, guys.
Sand painting is a collective art. It was practiced throughout the continent. The designs served as a spiritual support during ceremonies and were meant to disappear. The sacred designs had to remain invisible, especially to the non-initiated.
Revitalising our culture is becoming very strong on this island. We've lost all our ceremonies and most of our language, but most of it's revitalised. And hope we can keep that going through the children and get stronger.
The obvious wisdom of a 40,000-year-old people goes well beyond an image on the sand. And the Quandamuka Rangers are always on the move, on land and on sea.
Going up here is where we hunt the dugong and turtle. So this is very important habitat up here. And we work with the government to establish a slow zone on these banks with the seagrass beds because it's an important grazing habitat. You're not allowed to go fast through these waters here. The knowledge I acquired to enable myself to, satisfactorily pass the requirements to get a marine studies graduate certificate is pretty much the knowledge that I've gained from growing up here. I worked for marine parks for 15 years also, so I did a lot of diving. I'm also a scientific diver. I did a lot of diving, worked with a lot of scientific people. My grandfather and my elders and my peers taught me so much and learnt so much about the marine environment together, just like Patrick here. We're saltwater people. We've grown up on an island, so we know our environment. It's not like we're hanging around malls every day. We're hanging around the salt water every day.
Darren and Patrick checked the condition of the seaweed beds and the coral after the passage of Cyclone Debbie, which devastated the east coast of Australia. The water, normally crystal clear, is murky with sediment washed down by the floods. The island offers a very favorable habitat for sea turtles and dugongs, two emblematic animals for the Quandamooka. They live in the shallow waters that separate the island from the continent and are particularly vulnerable to the pressure of human activity. North Stradbroke is also a migration hub for the giants of the sea, like manta rays and whales. Once a year, the island has a front row seat for the largest migration of humpback whales on the east coast of Australia. At last count, there were 25,000 of them.
Ready to get in the jetty? Yeah. All right.
Back at the station, preparations are underway for a week-long mission. In North Stradbroke, the young generation is ready to take over.
There, Claudia, just do that, look.
I must have jammed it in there.
Yeah. When you pull it out there, just like that.
A hunting boat.
Young Aborigines can join the Rangers from the age of 16 and up. There are already a dozen following in the footsteps of Uncle Darren.
The more that I can entrust it to them to carry out the work, the more that realisation of them being, the leaders of tomorrow comes to fruition. So I can say, don't know what to do, and they'll be working with other people. But yeah, they don't need me with them for this one. And I can't be there every step of the way. They're on their feet now. They can be depended upon. All right, fellas, have a good trip, eh?
In North Stradbroke, the native title has given rise to a veritable renaissance for the Quandamooka. Pride in their origins is also part of the lifeblood of Lord Howe Island, where the story of the first inhabitants is still being written. A veritable oasis in the watery desert of the Pacific, this island was for a long time unknown to humans. Located 600 kilometers from the coast, this land is far from everything. Now, 350 people live on this lonely, lush rock, 11 kilometers long and 2 kilometers wide. Lord Howe Island was discovered by accident in 1788 by a ship loaded with prisoners en route for the penal colony. The island then became a strategic spot where the whaling ships that crisscrossed the zone could take on fresh water and provisions. The first pioneers did not settle here until 1834.
great-great-grandfather was Nathan Thompson. He was a whaler from Massachusetts in America. During one of his whaling voyages, they sailed past the islands of Kiribati, where they saw two women in a boat. One of them, who ended up being my great-grandmother, was just running away from her dad, who was trying to make her marry someone she didn't want to marry, and apparently she was a princess from that island. They took them on board and sailed, and they ended up coming to Lord Howe Island. Nathan decided, I'm going to set up my home here on this island, and he became one of the first settlers. Then he ended up marrying Boku, who was my great-great-grandmother, and they had children together, which is how I got here, and, you know, a lot of people on the island, yeah.
Lossy Thompson is 27 years old.
You could stay up there for ages, eh, Dad?
Yeah.
Like all islanders, she had to leave in order to pursue her education. She became a teacher on the continent, but her longing for her island home drew her back to her family.
I love this smell. It definitely reminds me of home whenever I smell these seeds. Just brings back awesome memories of just seeding with Dad. This island just draws you back here. When I'm away, I definitely get homesick. You always feel a bit guilty when you're not here in a way, because you feel like sometimes like you are letting go of like a heritage that you have, like a connection, a tie that you have to this place.
Yeah, tomorrow. Well, yeah, if it's like...
Most of the inhabitants here are related. Kyla is one of Lossy's many cousins. She's 20 and a mountain guide for The Mountain.
Kayla goes up like all the time.
Enough not to bother counting anymore.
Yeah, nah. We used to when we were younger. I remember we used to count. I used to always like count how many times I went up, but then you just lose track.
I'm just over it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Your escape, your isolation, you know, you can have the whole place to yourself. It's somewhere we're on a small place where you see everyone all the time. It's somewhere you can go as a little sanctuary, refuge, yeah.
There's no cell phone coverage on the island, no boutiques, no malls. The one road doesn't go anywhere. Rising 875 meters above sea level, Mount Gower is like a haven, a respite from the everyday routine. To reach the summit means a 5-hour climb covering 5 kilometers.
Well, Mount Gower is special because it is like it's a home to, for example, these birds that are flying around right now, the Providence petrel. It's these mountains are the only place in the world that they nest. They don't nest anywhere else.
It's like a little wonderland up here. Yeah, it's completely different to anything you'll find on the lower land of the island. Yeah, you've just got so many endemic plant species that are only found here. And if you come up by yourself, it's just you. It's just you and this place. So it's pretty special to be able to have that interaction. They're really territorial birds, so if they hear a noise or someone around their burrow, they see it as a threat, and so They come in to suss out what's happening and to protect their territory. Yeah, but they're pretty inquisitive, and they're not that aggressive, as you can see. In a way, we feel definitely a part of this island as much as the birds and the trees. And I think I need to do my part in protecting this island so that it doesn't, become like any other sort of resort, even protecting its natural flora and fauna to make sure it remains the beautiful island that it is.
Lossy has joined the weeding crew. Their job is to eradicate invasive plants. Lord Howe Island has been classed a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve on land and sea.
Where are we starting?
I think the last run is just there, love.
They mark out the entire zone in a grid, then go over it with a fine-toothed comb. They've inspected each square centimeter of the island to stop the spread of ground asparagus, a particularly harmful species.
Good one, Ernie.
There we go.
I got a groundie.
The weeding program was started 14 years ago. They have already clocked over 40,000 hours of weeding. Bruce has been part of the group right from the beginning.
When we started doing this, it was just everywhere, like a carpet of it. But in the areas where it was very thick, we had to spray, using poison and spray it. We're the most dangerous species, highly invasive, that's for sure. But that's how, of course, all these weeds got here by man. Yeah.
There's one down there.
Okay, Lossy, how about we get you geared up?
Over the top. Can be extreme at times, this job. That's what keeps it interesting and fun.
There's always going to be that challenge to get the last sort of sneaky weed, but hence we're sort of looking at rope access systems, drones, and in the future we'll be looking to get weed detector dogs, which are trained to sniff the scent of particular weeds.
It's an enormous job, and they take it dead seriously, for the ecological stakes are high. Lord Howe and its neighboring islets are home to little-known and vulnerable species. % of the noxious weeds have been removed, but the birds continue to spread the seeds. The team hopes to put an end to the problem in 15 years. But if even one harmful plant survives, this Herculean effort will have been in vain.
These are some loose rocks. Ground asparagus will grow up in trees, like in the rocks, on the cliffs, everywhere. They will just grow. So it does seem like a bit of an endless task, but it's a really important one because, like, if these were to just take over the forest, I think, or the bush, it would just definitely be really devastating for the island.
Lossy is getting back to her roots and is inspired by them for the songs she composes.
Carve it on a tree, you write it on the sea. You are my best friend. A lot of songs that I write are always me often longing to be at home. You know, just songs about wanting to be in a place that I love, with the people that I love, on an island that I love, doing the things that I love. And it's an awesome way to also share with people about Lord Howe as well, about where I come from. I think I come from Daintree. We are together in time. We are together in time. I think we lost the beauty in simplicity, like with all modern day technologies, even the way like food is processed, like everything's designed in order for us to get it done quickly, have it now so that we can go to our, you know, shove things in the microwave, press a few buttons and it's done, so that we can then live and pack as much into our lives as possible. And I think that just takes away just from the beauty of the simple things in life, like standing under a few palm trees and cooking some fish on a fire, and like not having the sound of a TV in your face, and, you know, not having your phone here looking at Facebook or on Instagram all the time, like all that just taken away, and just enjoying people's company. Yeah, that's what I think.
Well said, Lossy. Well said.
Sound of silence.
Lord Howe Island is an enchanted interlude. Thanks to its isolation, the inhabitants have learned to be happy with the gifts of nature. Cape Tribulation, with its own Jurassic beauty, has been fascinating and intimidating people ever since man set foot here. Water. Tons of water. That's the secret of longevity of the Daintree rainforest. 135 million years old, it's thought to be the world's oldest forest. Clouds coming from the Pacific end their voyage here, blocked by the barrier of the coastal mountain range. This forest covers no more than 0.1% of Australia's total surface, hardly 1,200 square kilometers, but it is home to the continent's richest and most complex ecosystem. Claire Gely is an entomologist. She left France and crossed the planet to pursue her passion for insects. She's 25 and working on her doctoral thesis at the University of Brisbane. In this lush primary forest, She's trying to uncover the secrets of bugs and their microcosm.
I know that most people don't really like insects, buggy creatures, spiders and such. It's something that you learn to love. I've never been disgusted by insects. I've always found them pretty nice. And the more you learn about things, the more you can find beauty in them. Plus, there are some really magnificent creatures here in Australia. Brightly coloured butterflies, 20 centimetres across, beetles that are fluorescent, blue and green. Yes, I find a certain beauty in insects. I remember when I was a little girl, 4 or 5 years old, I'd go into the forest and I was fascinated by the ants. I'd watch the ant colonies on the march for hours. I always liked science, understanding how things worked in nature and in general. I've always read a lot of books on the subject.
The James Cook University has set up a research center at Cape Tribulation in the heart of the forest in order to study the climate. And they were thinking big. They covered half a hectare with tarps and drains to divert the rainwater and reproduce the effects of a drought on the forest.
This experiment was set up 2 years ago. We can already see the effects here. The forest is not yet a desert, but it is becoming less dense, less lush. The leaves of the shrubs are a lot drier. They have less sap. These are the early signs that the forest is dying, that the shrubs are dying, that the tall trees are dying. Here the ground is very dry. Generally in a tropical forest, even when it doesn't rain, the ground is always damp. There is also less regrowth of the shrubs, except for here and there. Normally you have much denser growth.
Insects have a very short life cycle. They are the first to suffer the effects of the climatic upheavals. By making projections into the future through this experiment, scientists are trying to come up with possible solutions to save the forest. Insects are drawn to light at night because they get their orientation by the moon and the stars. They mistake the trap for the moon and heedlessly fly towards it. When they get to the fake moon, which they never should have reached, they're confused, so they flutter about not knowing where to go until they're exhausted.
The increasing temperatures are an important aspect of climate change, but not the only one. The climate change will bring more extremes like cyclones and floods. We're going to have extreme temperatures of hot and cold. These extreme events endanger the species living in nature. For example, concerning entomology, we're now seeing that the pollinators are being affected. Without pollinators, we know that agriculture will suffer and there'll be a lot less food for humans in 20 to 30 years.
Claire is also studying the impact of climate change on other species. The naturalist David White is helping her in her work. His sun-powered boat allows them to get close to the birds without frightening them. But the tropical forest is much too dense to do a visual count of the birds living in the heart of the forest.
I've practiced so that I can identify about 200 different species of birds. Australia is home to about 800 bird species. I've learned to recognize mainly the birds of the forest and the east coast of Australia because this is where I work. A lot of birds are migratory. Their migration depends a good deal on the climate. Even the non-migrators tend to move about according to the food sources, which depend on the climate.
Rainbow lorikeets live all along the east coast. They gorge themselves on fermented fruit, which gets them drunk. Then they behave very strangely. They hang from the branches, shove each other, and sometimes even fall out of the trees. To the great delight of the saltwater crocodiles, the most dangerous in the world. They can grow to 9 meters in length and weigh over a ton. The bird eats the insect, the snake eats the frog, and the python eats the bat. Each species has its role to play in the tropical forest.
There's 2 different types of bats in the world. There's microbats, which are the little ones that live in caves, and they come out at night and eat insects. These ones we have here are called megabats, and they're bigger, and they don't have any echolocation, so they live outside. They can't navigate in the pitch darkness. In the rainforest they are very important, and they are what they call a keystone species. So without our bats, we wouldn't have a rainforest. They pick a fruit off the rainforest tree, and they fly along with it, sucking the juice out, and then they spit it out somewhere else. It's still going to grow, so it's very good at, the bats are very good at regenerating the rainforest. They also get nectar from the flowers, so they get pollen on their fur, and then they go to another flower and cross-pollinate the flower. So just as important as the bees.
The Daintree River is a natural frontier. Cape Tribulation to the north is isolated, for there are no bridges leading to it. Man tried to tame it for a long time, but the torrential rains thwarted the many attempts. To carry out her research and better understand the mechanisms that govern the forest, Claire has hooked up with Joe Rakel, a botanist for the NGO Rainforest Rescue. Hectare by hectare, the organization is buying up the fields and abandoned land in an attempt to erase the errors of the past. 200,000 trees have already been planted on 28 parcels of land.
Yep. This is the front of the block I've just showed you here that we've planted. This is the section here when we planted the trees.
So this is basically where we are standing.
Where we're standing now, yeah.
That was 6 years ago.
6 years ago. That's quite incredible.
Impressive.
But can you see the difference?
Yeah.
This is Heliocarpus, or a quandong tree, and it's 6 years old, believe it or not. We stop measuring once they get past 10 metres, but in 6 years it's exceeded it. The birds like it because you can see the seedlings. All the new seedlings have come up. This will take over. And this is our new forest. Now you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 species in an area that's like that. So the diversity is just quite incredible.
Saving this forest means giving a chance to the cassowary, the lord of Cape Tribulation. Its powerful claws and hefty weight of 70 kilos make it the world's most dangerous bird. Yet it is now in great danger of extinction.
We work on a policy of there's no sense in saving a species unless you save a habitat, unless you put it in a zoo. So we're restoring the forest and the surrounding areas for it. It creates food for the wildlife and insects and birds, so nature's the winner. There is hope.
The forest canopy has long been unknown territory to scientists. They tried a variety of ways of finding out what was happening up in the canopy. They used slingshots to knock down leaves from way up. They used bows and arrows to shoot cords above the canopy. It was really tedious. Now that we have a crane, there are about a dozen like it in the world, we can find out what's really going on in the canopy. And in fact, we realized that we have a very different biodiversity up here, and also a much richer one.
This crane covers 1 hectare of forest, 1/2 of which is being deprived of water for the artificial drought experiment. Andrew Thompson escorts scientists who've come from the world over to study life in the canopy.
All insects have 6 legs. All spiders have 8. But everything with 8 legs is not necessarily a spider, and everything with 6 legs is not necessarily an insect. A millipede belongs to the group of arthropods. There you have insects, spiders, millipedes, all the creepy crawlers that most people don't like.
Every time she finds a little piece of flower or leaf that's not there, she'll take it off the web because it makes the web easier to see.
Yeah.
There's the little male spider just here.
Ah, yeah.
So this is the female, and then the males are really, really small. And she's probably half the size that she'll end up being by the time she's mature. When they have to mate with a female, they have to put her into a trance, so they'll actually climb onto her back and drum with their legs and sort of really relax her down so they can try and mate with her. Otherwise she'll sort of go for them and eat them.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Cape Tribulation certainly lives up to its name. Unraveling the secrets of this forest that for 135 million years has stood up to the climate and man might give a chance of survival to all species. Today, Somewhere on Earth invites you to Tasmania, where the Pacific and Indian Oceans meet, in the roaring 40s, south of Australia. Tasmania is a land inaccessible in places, where the dense forests go right down to the sea. Richard Bennett lives on Bruny, a little island off Hobart, the largest town in Tasmania. On this slip of land, this photographer has found the light, colors, and the seascapes that never cease to delight him. Steve, a former ranger, likes to explore the forest on the lookout for trees that could very well go unnoticed. And yet, they are nicknamed yellow gold. Yuan pine trees can live as long as 10,000 years. They are one of the oldest forms of life on our planet. Steve is one of the rare people able to recognize them in this forest. Liam and James are two brothers wild about surfing and deserted beaches. Their passion leads them into the heart of the bush. Tasmania is their playground.
It's really empowering. It makes you feel like you're able to survive on your own. There's nothing, there's no houses, there's no roads, there's no cars, there's no anything. It's just us, the ocean, the bush.
Its geographical situation makes Tasmania an island destined to remain in the shadow of the Australian giant. Its isolation has ensured its protection. Its land and vegetation are unspoiled. Tasmania, discovered in the 17th century, became a port of call for famous navigators. Its coasts have always been buffeted by the violence of ocean, waves, and wind. For a long time, the interior of the island remained inaccessible to the rare sailors who landed here. Geographers and sailors gave it a concrete existence. They charted its coastlines and made it known to the world. From that point on, those who chose to remain here were men in the image of the island, genuine and solid. The island has changed little since the arrival of the Europeans. Richard has lived here for some time now, off the coast of Tasmania's largest town, Hobart.
I like space. I like to be able to light a fire, to cook on a fire, and I like to be able to go and anchor in a bay and be the only people there and not see other people. Getting up early and going out when the tide's coming in the morning, the fish seem to like that particularly well. But then, given that we live in the roaring 40s where the weather is often windy and wet, we need to take the opportunity to fish when conditions are reasonable. I think that's the secret, and we seem to have a fish. Voila! I made my living doing the things that I enjoy. I bushwalked and published books, and I photographed the Sydney Hobart yacht race because it's photography that I love, and I do it from aircraft that I find very exciting. So I built my career around doing what I wanted to do. I don't really do much that I don't want to do. It is a Port Jackson shark. We will let him go. I don't eat sharks.
Richard particularly enjoys these moments of peace and quiet when he returns home from his expeditions through the Tasmanian bush. The photographer frequently travels across these wide open spaces.
Wilderness has the wonderful effect of giving your emotions a workout. You get cold, you get hot, you get tired, you get hungry, you get wet, you get thirsty, and sometimes you become afraid, and you become excited, and you come home with a feeling of, I guess, spiritual satisfaction in having spent some quiet times in the wilderness, and then you look back at your busy life and you see it with a perspective, because you've had the opportunity to get away from it for a little while.
Bruny is a small Tasmanian island. Richard chose to live here for its light and its landscapes. He calls himself a painter of still images. He has the soul of a vagabond, and what he likes most is wandering. For him, every moment has its own emotional color.
Wherever you go in the world, there are very subtle differences in the colours, in the palette of the landscape. And you get a different shade to the sea here in the Southern Ocean to the colours a little bit further north. And the beaches are different. They're subtly different in softness or hardness to walk on, and the colour of the sand varies, and also the interaction of lagoons and creeks and water with the sand forms unique patterns that become like a signature to a particular place that is unique.
Crossing this little island from north to south is like approaching the ends of the earth. This lighthouse is a last landmark, a final reminder on this little island before miles and miles of ocean. They are no more than a handful, the sailors who give this lighthouse one last glance as they head south on their way towards higher latitudes, towards the mythical land of ice.
Well, this is the southernmost part of Australia, and Antarctica is due south that way. There is no land apart from Macquarie Island between here and Antarctica.
Tasmania may be a slightly forgotten island, but its port, Hobart, is known to scientists the world over. This is where they embark for 20 days at sea on their way to Antarctica. The mission of the famous French ship, the Astrolabe, is to supply the research station of Dumont d'Urville, where hundreds of scientists are based. In the southern hemisphere, the summer, from October to March, is when the ice floe breaks up. At last, the trip is possible. Scientists from the four corners of the Earth have managed to protect the Antarctic's land of ice. The South Pole has become a global sanctuary. Tasmanians are very committed to keeping their lands unspoiled. Today, entire regions of the island are World Heritage Sites. And Richard is one of those with a deep respect for nature. Richard likes these moments when time seems suspended, holding its breath. Here, two opposing influences sometimes give birth to impressive storms. This strip of sand is a fragile border between two of the world's largest oceans. On one side, the Indian Ocean. On the other, the Pacific.
I think being close to the Southern Ocean always gives a unique atmosphere. There's a wildness to the landscape, and I seem to be happy when I'm in wild places. I like storms in particular. I photograph storms, and memorable times in the bush have been in enduring storms. I think we become very insignificant compared with the unpredictable power of nature. The ocean is very unforgiving, and it goes on unrelenting forever.
Richard's reputation as a photographer is due largely to his pictures of the annual Sydney Hobart race, one of the world's most prestigious regattas. Each of his photos tells the story of the crews that come to take up the challenge. Richard knows them all. He's been photographing them for 40 years. Land, sea, and sky. Richard has a passion for aerial photography. There's nothing like the light of dawn to take the little island of Bruny by surprise.
Tasmania is a photographer's paradise. There's so much variety, and it changes with seasons, and being such a small island, it's so compact, so there's endless variety. I just love aircraft, and it's like a magic carpet, and having a bird's eye view of the world. And the wonderful thing about an aircraft is you can move quickly, and you can change your position, and you can see the changing light around the subject as you move. And you can move in close and get high and low, and aerial photographs have impact because not many people see the landscape from the air.
On the little island of Bruny, Richard has managed to create the life he dreamed of. Tasmanian born, he has never left this land. Tasmania resembles those who live here. Its people defend and protect it. It lives within them all. It is part of them. Steve is a former ranger. He has roamed this forest all his life. This is where he saw his very first Yuan pine tree. This tree might go unnoticed, but for one particularity that makes it unique in the world. The oldest of them can be 10,000 years old. These exceptional trees grow only 1 or 2 millimeters a year. This very slow growth allows them to survive for centuries and centuries. Reaching them is a real challenge.
Oh, it's good technical fun and gives you a good workout. But when you're on a serious expedition, getting through that can slow your travel down to less than 1 kilometre a day. And therefore you've got to really plan for the trip.
He starts his expedition with a visit to an old friend. For Steve, this tree is one of the most representative of its species. You could pass right by it without noticing it. The height of this Yuan pine might not be impressive, but its breadth should command respect. Dozens of trunks feeding on one another.
This is a fascinating example of the way Yuan pine can grow vegetatively. What happens is the tree can fall down for whatever reason. It can rot out at the base, but it doesn't necessarily have to die. What it can do is sprout again from the fallen trunk, and it can do that over and over again. And there's one example that we know of where the one single tree has been regenerating vegetatively like this for 10,000 years. And that's one of the oldest living single organisms that we know about.
And that's exactly what fascinates Steve about the Yuan pine. Nature seems to defy the passing of time.
To spend a night up here in the far reaches of the Gordon River, where many miles from any road, many miles from any habitation, and it's a truly awesome experience. The forest comes alive at night. The forest animals sleep in the daytime, and I can lie in my tent and hear the forest live. And it's just really wonderful to be out here. The adventure to the big tree is more philosophical in a way. We don't need necessarily to go and inspect it personally, but it means a lot to me personally to know that that tree, that particular individual tree, is still there and is standing and is healthy, and it is an adventure.
Steve is so committed because these trees almost disappeared. When the English took over Tasmania at the beginning of the 19th century, they needed wood to repair and construct boats. That was the beginning of an inexorable process of destruction. With its slow growth, the Yuan pine produces very dense, robust wood, rich in essential oil. It became very sought after for its exceptional qualities, above all its resistance to seawater. It is the perfect wood for boat building. This sailboat, the Gypsy, was built in 1914 out of yuan pine. Steve is often on board, and this boat is a reminder. He and Chris, head of the Strahan Rangers, are trying to protect these trees.
So, Steve, you'll be leaving by seaplane from Strahan.
Yes.
And you'll be flying through to the mouth of the Gordon.
Right.
Coming up to the Gordon and look at these.
Capture that one in here.
Capture these trees in here. Because
The rangers know full well that this vulnerable forest needs to be protected. Chris also likes this otherworldly place. He and Steve organize reconnaissance missions together.
Not a worry.
The thing to be really careful with the river, as you know, Steve, is that if we get rain, the river can rise really fast. Navigating in this country is really dangerous. And we just evacuated a guy the other night from here for snake bite.
Oh, right. Yes, snakes are an interesting problem right now.
They're moving. They're very active.
Yes.
And they're even in their forests, they're active.
When I see the view from the air, I realise just how privileged I am to be able to see it from the air. It's a rare privilege. How large the Earth actually is. And it's really interesting to be on a part of the Earth where the impact of man is so limited. It brings us back to the reality of the real world, the way it was.
The only way to get deeper into the forest is by seaplane. Flying is not always possible. Violent winds and even snowstorms sometimes blow up in this region of western Tasmania, even in summer. Not to mention the ever-present mist.
The cloud looks very romantic. The fog in the valleys is very atmospheric, but if the aircraft gets lost in that fog, it can be extremely dangerous because the mountains are much higher than we're flying, and we're flying visual. We hold our breath that we don't get too cloud bound. Very dramatic landing. Yeah, it's very cool. Yeah, it's a great spot.
Okay, thanks very much.
No worries, eh? Have a good trip.
It was a good flight.
Cheers.
And I'll see you later on and catch it.
See ya.
See ya.
In order to carry out his mission, Steve heads up the Gordon River. Apart from seaplane, the river is the only possible way for him to get into the heart of the forest. Along these banks is the site of unbridled nature. The Yuan pines used to grow thick along these banks, like a lost tribe reigning over the river, long before man did. Highly prized for its golden yellow wood, the Yuan pine was overexploited. Today, there's nothing left of those landscapes. Except here. This Yuan pine is a vestige of the past, a survivor of a very somber chapter of Tasmania's history. As he goes up the Gordon River, Steve travels back in time. In the 19th century, all the Yuan pines growing along these banks were systematically cut down for boat building. All those accessible from the water met the same fate, which makes the tree even more precious today. Steve has always fought for this forest to keep its soul, by protesting dam projects, then later by fighting against erosion. By coming back here to the banks of the Gordon River, he's making sure that his commitment is still bearing fruit.
We will attempt to relocate them, but it's a real expedition because it was decided that we wouldn't mark the site with a track or tapes so that the site would be truly protected. And the best way it could be protected is for people not to know where it is. If people knew where it is, then the site might be abused. So our philosophy has been that if people want to try hard enough to go and find the sites, they're welcome to. It's a public national park, but we won't go to any length of effort to assist them.
Steve always thinks of his ancestors when he comes here, because the Gordon River was also the scene of a human tragedy. Tasmania, a far-off land for the English, was first used by them as a penal colony. Convicts sentenced to hard labor were forced to cut down Yuan pines. Many of them died of exhaustion or disease. The Gordon River would be their final resting place.
It's very easy to get lost in the forest. The forest has no particular features anywhere. It's a big lowland with very thick forest. So you have to be careful with the use of a compass to make sure you can get back to the river, which is where you can locate your position again with the GPS. Oh, people have been lost. People, highly experienced people, have wandered off into the bush thinking that they knew their way around, not even particularly thinking of going far, and then discovered that they couldn't tell which way the river was because the cloud covered the sun. The forest didn't have any particular features, so it was impossible to tell which way the river was. And they would wander around in circles for quite a while, and in the case I'm thinking about, they were very lucky to stumble back to the river before dark.
Steve is well aware of these dangers, but still he always goes that little bit further, because he knows that somewhere in this forest, other specimens might be hiding. That's what pushes him, discovering Yuan pines, listing them, and especially noting their location. For the last few years, there has been strict protection for the Yuan pine. Their exploitation is totally prohibited. Only the old stumps left by the convicts can still be used. Its wood has become so precious, it's been named yellow gold.
There's only 3 areas left in southwest Tasmania where these big old fellas still live. This is one of them, and we're in a little forest here, and I can look around and I can see another tree over there that would be 2,000 years old, and I passed one a little further back there that would be similar, and we have a beautiful little copse of trees here that are all truly ancient, thousands of years old, literally. Well, the southwest wilderness is huge. It covers 20% of Tasmania, and we only found this by accident. So, sure, there may be other coops of trees, maybe some even up more old, more ancient. It'll be great fun to go and find them, yeah. We had an idea it was here. We heard a report that it was here, but we hadn't come and found out and recorded it. And now we know about it, and we can take special care to make sure that these trees continue to do their thing, yeah.
Back from his expedition, Steve keeps quiet about his discoveries. Except to Chris. Protecting Yuan pines requires discretion. This is a way of paying homage to these venerable trees. In Steve's eyes, these amazing trees, capable of being born again from their own remains, seem like the last masters of time.
I really like the energy of the sea, and it's a really good source of handle material. Quite often there's some really nice bits of driftwood or bone. You know, I get now and then I get some whale bone, or you know, there's all sorts of things wash up on the seashores.
Precisely. This ordinary piece of wood that looks quite dull is actually a whalebone, washed up onto the sand one stormy day. When John came here 20 years ago, he discovered a passion for a trade that had almost disappeared. John is one of the last blacksmiths in Tasmania.
I think anything that's been made with passion absorbs the energy of the maker, because you're handling it, you're touching it. And I don't think it's such a big deal. You know, it doesn't mean to say I have to make a religion out of it. It's just energy, and the actual elements that are in the knife absorb the energy of the maker, and people can pick that knife up or whatever that's been made by hand, and they can feel that energy in it. Rubber ducky, you're the one. You make me feel like so much fun. This is great, just lying back looking at the clouds and listening to the birds and watching the trees, just relaxing. You couldn't do this in the city, could you? Yeah, this is purely Tasmanian, this one. Yep, 100%. That's a good idea, to sit in amongst the bush. That's great. Relax, stress relief, it's good.
Hey, John.
Hey, Elaine, how you going, dude?
John is known in the region for making solid knives that are perfect for the bush. He says that his reputation has traveled well beyond Tasmania. He has, he says, even forged blades for samurai swords.
But it's got to be solid.
Yeah, oh yeah, really strong
It's really
stuff.
strong,
A high chrome
Yeah, right.
stainless steel. We could use a bit of red gum. That's pretty solid wood. They make railway sleepers out of that.
Yeah, right.
Or actually, something you can grab onto, a bit of antler.
Oh, right.
Yeah, Toby uses that out at sea for antler filleting fish because, you know, you got, in rough weather and that, you know, you got something to grip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Yeah. And that's a good idea, I mean.
John knows the two Corey brothers well. Liam and James are surfers. What they like is going off together on expeditions lasting days and days, far away from Hobart, the city where they live. Liam, the elder brother, is a nurse. James, the younger brother, is a medical student. Both brothers love this maverick life. Thanks to their father, they both learned very young how to make do with nothing or next to nothing.
That's the plan to go down Saturday. Yeah. We could,
This morning, the swell looks promising. They're in luck. As they spend all their free time in search of waves, they always leave at the drop of a hat.
Basically, looking at riding our bikes with all our equipment into the southwest World Heritage Area, which takes up sort of 1/3 of Tasmania. And we will ride our bikes for some time into where the road finishes. And then we will take our backpacks and our surfboards and walk down to the southwest coast. People call you crazy, but when you do it very regularly, it's not to us. It's not crazy. It's normal and it's perfect and it's really good. So these are my 4 little beautiful chooks. A couple of ducks. Ducks are called Darth and Vader. Chooks don't have names, but they lay lots of really good eggs. And over here, got big crop, corn up there, tomatoes, peas, most of the veggies we need at the moment.
Out in the yard, there are hundreds of bicycles, from old models to recent ones. Liam is known far and wide for his passion for two-wheelers. Little by little, he has become the local bike repairman. At his home, there are bicycles everywhere, and sometimes even where you would least expect them. The bicycle gives the two brothers a chance to take advantage of the country. They like open space, having the horizon for themselves, and feeling alone in the world. like here at Pedder Lake. Situated in the very heart of Tasmania, Pedder Lake is the largest body of fresh water in Australia. In the 1970s, several large dams were built here, causing vast stretches of sandy beaches to disappear. The Tasmanians were scandalized and became ardent defenders of their island. Today, this spot symbolizes the fight to safeguard Tasmania. Liam and James have to travel several hundred kilometers. They both take part from time to time in triathlons. They both share the pleasure of pushing themselves to their limits.
Bike touring is just awesome, and doing it in Tassie to go surfing is just the ultimate combination, basically. Like, going on a surf trip is fun, going for a ride is fun. You put them together and you've got a lethal mix.
Yeah. For me, I think it's a pride, like a pride thing. You feel really proud that you've walked out your front door, you've got on your bike with all your gear, and you've ridden to wherever you're going. You've walked, surfed, whatever, come back all by yourself.
The waves of Tasmania's deserted beaches aren't easy to approach. You have to work for them. After cycling comes walking. From now on, our two surfers will carry only the bare essentials.
My 6'6" baby. She's long and she's slender.
Can you hear the surf? Well, the sun's just risen. That's nice. It's pretty early in the morning. It's about 6:30, and we've got about another 10 kilometres to go to where we're hoping to surf this morning. So just kind of cruising along.
Our two wave hunters are well aware that as far as the weather is concerned, nothing is certain, and the ocean has a mind of its own. A year ago, they spent several weeks roaming the wild coasts of Tasmania alone, with just their backpacks and their boards. They hiked along beaches and riverbanks where few people had walked before them, as there were neither paths nor posted trails.
There's a wave, there's a wave, there's a wave! So, looks like there might be a possibility that James will get a little ride out there. So if I try and get some dinner and he tries to get some waves, we should come up with the goods, hopefully.
Sounds all right.
Eating shellfish like abalone, living simply. This is the brothers' lifestyle, one of the bases of their complicity. By becoming one with these places, they're letting nature guide them in their apprenticeship of life.
It's fantastic. Nothing better than paddling around out there with my brother, watching him catch some waves, finding a bit of dinner, seeing the sun come out every now and again. It's beautiful. Love this kind of life.
Wandering in this environment has always brought the two brothers closer together. On each stage of the journey, they learn something. On every beach, the currents and the winds are different. They have to know how to observe, to foresee the dangers so as to avoid traps.
It's really empowering. It makes you feel like you're able to survive on your own. There's nothing, there's no houses, there's no roads, there's no cars, there's no anything. It's just us, the ocean, the bush.
In Tasmania at least, like, I just always have days like this. And like when it usually comes home about when you're eating the abalone and the light gets good, the sun's setting, you've had a nice surf and a big walk, and you just go, shit, I could die. Like, we've sort of achieved perfection, you know? Like, that's a little bit how it feels, just when everything is so beautiful.
The two brothers never know in advance where their wanderings will lead them, if it's not to a beach. However, they have gained an intuitive knowledge of their island. It's ingrained in them.
I think it's really just the search for new places and new waves that's sort of driven us. Like, it's awesome to be out here. It's fun to camp. It's fun to fish, and it's the waves are really good. So the whole adventure's always worth it. But it's that sort of search for something new and something different and something that's a little bit off the beaten track that has driven us to have a look.
We're working on that. When you're spending days and days and days alone with your brother in the bush, if you're fighting, then it's not that fun. So
good opportunities for conflict resolution.
Yeah, good opportunities to be nice to each other.
Yeah,
which is a good thing.
One of the best things about being out here is that it puts all the rest of your experiences in life into perspective and makes you enjoy everything a bit more, I think.
The quest for the perfect wave leads Liam and James to face many challenges. After days spent trekking through the bush, they give themselves up completely to the pleasures of surfing. They have the feeling that they've finally arrived somewhere. New Zealand. This group of islands in the South Pacific is the remnant of a sunken prehistoric continent. We'll be crossing South Island. It's the largest and least populated, teeming with exuberant vegetation. Peter Geen used to be a farmer. He's traded in his tools for paintbrushes. He has set up his studio near some of the most stunning sights and travels the country to capture the light, settings, and impressions. Dave Downs spends a good deal of his time poking around the riverbeds of the Hokitika region, his practiced eye on the lookout for jade stones. This experienced jade hunter has a passion for these stones and hoards them like a treasure. Stewart Island off the south coast numbers 400 inhabitants. Farhana Ahmad is one of them. This young woman who talks with the birds was born in Kenya, grew up in England, and was an accountant before settling here in the roaring 40s.
I've travelled to a number of different places and lived in a number of different countries, and I just think it's a place of complete timeless beauty. It's a place that I'm really lucky to have found.
Aotearoa. In Maori, this means land of the long white cloud. This is the name the Maoris gave this unknown, uninhabited land when they came here from Polynesia about 800 years ago. After the early Maoris, it was a long time before other men reached this island far from anywhere. The first Europeans, the Dutch, arrived here less than 4 centuries ago. They named this country New Zealand after a maritime province of the Netherlands. This island, along with the Antarctic, is one of the last great territories discovered by man. This young land, with its short history, was preserved from human activity for a long time, which is why the wildlife in New Zealand is particularly rich, lush, and beautiful. Golden Bay. This is where Abel Tasman, the first European to land here, dropped anchor. There was also James Cook. With its 15,000 kilometers of coast, New Zealand is a land of mariners and sailing. Peter and his wife Carrie are out paddling on Golden Bay in the early light of dawn, but they're not doing it just for the exercise. Peter captures sensations. He seizes the different lights, reflections, and all the expressions of nature that he will rework later.
I take all the pictures I can, because it's a digital camera, and when I get home, I'll then put them onto my laptop and start whittling them down and refining until I finally see a photo that I think could make a good painting, and then and just watch it grow.
The reason I like that scene is mainly because it's a rock. It's solitude, it represents solitude. It's solid, it represents age. It's, been in all weathers, and there's just something nice about it, how it just sits there, reflecting, and yeah, it's just nice and peaceful, and sort of, yeah, it's a bit how I feel sometimes. It's a fantastic place to go, yes. Yes, you can always go around there and be guaranteed a painting from a trip around there in the kayak, that's for sure. I try to change the mood in the painting. I think that's probably what I do from the photograph. And it's my interpretation of what that photograph is.
New Zealanders are very ecology-minded, and Peter and Carrie are good examples. Their garden is thriving. The earth is generous. The climate, ideal.
Mostly, probably about 90% of our food we grow ourselves. Hey girls. It's a great healthy lifestyle. It's a good way to eat food that hasn't travelled any distance. We grow it ourselves without the use of sprays. So yes, it's a good feeling to eat good, clean food in an environment where we grow it ourselves.
And it's all under control. Organic, yes, but all the plants have to toe the line. Nothing out of line in this bucolic setting laid out by Peter and Carrie. For a long time, they themselves were a producer of organic fruit and vegetables, first in Australia, then in New Zealand. It seems they've completely tamed nature here.
When you go to the supermarket, the food doesn't look like food anymore, not like the food that we used to, or our grandparents used to eat. It's hardly recognisable as food because there are so many ingredients in the food that I can't even pronounce. And it's a real paradox that we know more about food and nutrition than we've probably ever known in the world. And yet there's more sickness, there's more obesity and heart disease and cancer. And yeah, we wonder if it's not being caused by what people eat. That slow food revolution. It's grow the food as well as prepare it yourself. Sit down and enjoy it and honour the food that you eat. We prepare it as close as possible to Mother Nature has presented it to us.
Peter worked the land for 25 years. Then he put away his farming tools for good and took up the paintbrush. He transformed his hobby into a full-time activity. Peter regularly leaves his studio to head out on field trips. 2 or 3 days on the road in search of the most beautiful spots. And here he's certainly spoiled for choice.
Well, a field trip is basically information gathering. It's a way of getting out into the environment and living in the environment and smelling the environment and what have you, and absorbing the necessary ingredients to take back to the studio to work with. There's still a few spots out there yet to be discovered, but there's a lot of places that we have been, that's for sure. There's 2 blues out there today. You've got the warm blue in the sky and the cooler blue in the estuary. And yeah, I think 2 colours of blue like that in one image is really a real treat. And yeah, and they've got the contrast of the orange on the cliffs. And yeah, there's some lovely colour out there today.
New Zealand is a vast country, but you only need to go a few dozen kilometers to find yourself in a totally different landscape. From the sea to the mountains, the transition is quite abrupt.
It's very dry, isn't it? Yeah.
And each time the surprising settings take the traveler on a voyage through time.
it's in its raw state and it's very natural. The landscape can tell me a lot, and I can get a lot of ideas, and I can add that to other paintings that I do. It's just been left alone, and it's happened over a long, long period of time. And if you leave it alone and let it go and do its own natural thing, it'll look beautiful one day.
The entire west coast of South Island gets heavy rains. Between downpours, the sky clears up, and the sun pours down into these valleys of the rainforest thick with tree ferns. Nature offers the painter a rich palette of greens. Peter's camping car serves as his second studio. And Peter and Kerry have been traveling like this ever since they met. The camping car even played an important role when they first met.
Well, that wasn't in New Zealand, actually. That was in Australia. Kerry was cycling from Tasmania up to Queensland, and I was travelling on my own in a Volkswagen Combi, and we met, and suddenly the bike got sold, and we started travelling in the Combi, and we've been together ever since. We've always worked together, we've always been self-employed, and we enjoy each other's company profusely, and yeah, we love each other very much. A bit of erosion up there though.
I think Peter needs a break so he can get into the environment, and I like to come with him. So yeah, he needs to get out, and I think he sees almost every time he goes on a field trip, he comes back full of inspiration. He's got to get into a painting really quickly. So yeah, it's good for him.
I can't believe it. You see anything? No. We're looking for New Zealand power, or abalone. There doesn't seem to be much here today. We may have to trek down to the other end of the beach. Ah, luck. Kerry?
The abalone is a strange marine gastropod that spends its life stuck fast to the rocks. The inner side of its ear-shaped shell is covered with beautiful and valuable nacre.
Peter, is that long enough?
But here, Peter is after its delicious flesh. Abalone are plentiful here on the west coast of New Zealand.
That should be enough. Turn it over and check the size. Yep.
And Peter's little escapades always finish in the same way, with the painter alone before his canvas, working doggedly for days and days to distill the images stored in his head.
A photo will only capture a certain amount of information that I require, and I'll further that, and that's the advantage of doing a field trip. So I bring the landscape to me. I enjoy being in the natural environment, and I certainly have a great appreciation for it. particularly the undisturbed natural environment, and by that I mean environments that haven't been modified by man. You know, I mean, a tree like this, for example, is living a pretty tough life, as you can see. You know, its faces into the wind and it's getting a pretty hard time, and I think that's deserving of some sort of recognition, I suppose. So that's really why I paint a subject like this.
With Peter's high-definition landscapes, it's sometimes hard to tell the difference between reality and the painting. Peter has chosen to portray what is beautiful, naturally beautiful. And such is his love for his models that he always tends to sublimate these images of nature that he is so fond of.
I like to come on site and bring the painting back towards the very end of the painting process. It certainly helps put some truth and honesty into the painting. Sometimes it's quite difficult because the paintings are big and the easels are big and I've got to lug all my equipment to the site, and if it's a long way away it's quite a mission, but sometimes the final touches that you see the most, so it is important.
Peter Geen is now a recognized artist in his country. But this regionalist painter, as he calls himself, is above all happy to have fulfilled his dream, to live for painting and to continue to take delight in the impressive variety of these landscapes. The west coast of South Island faces the Tasman Sea. The banks of clouds that form in the middle of the Pacific roll in from the northwest. The west coast is virgin territory, pioneer country. A 150 years ago, this hostile region, wild and practically uninhabited, was the scene of a sudden massive influx of migrants. When prospectors discovered huge nuggets of gold here in 1860, the news spread like wildfire. From one day to the next, tens of thousands of people from all over the world flocked to this west coast to try their luck. Towns popped up like mushrooms, with their saloons, hotels, brothels, and tradesfolk that followed in the wake of the prospectors. They even quickly built a dock in Hokitika for the many boats bringing in new arrivals. The California gold rush had already petered out, so New Zealand appeared as the new Far West. And so many came, all lured by dreams of riches. In a few years, the West Coast was transformed, ravaged, and a good number of valleys were leveled by the miners who laid waste to entire hillsides in their quest for the coveted gold. And as always, the fever eventually dropped, almost as abruptly as it had broken out. Now there are still a few active mines, but the fantastic nuggets weighing several kilos are a thing of the past. Gold no longer fires the imagination. However, there are still some people who search the rivers of the Hokitika region.
Well, if you don't care if you get wet, it doesn't matter. See, them rocks are slippery, aren't they? You've got to be really careful. The water's nice and clear, though. Grab that view, Al. You see how it breaks the water?
Today, Dave Downs has brought his grandchildren along with him. This young, attentive grandfather wants to share his quest with them.
Looking for Ponamu, greenstone. Just gets washed down on the hills and into the river. When it rains and it floods, it comes up real high. You could see along the banks how high it will get, and it turns it over like a washing machine. So you've got more chance of finding the stone once it's turned over. It's really good. When it's on the bank, it dries out and it just looks like the normal stones. But when it's wet in the river, it's a bit easier to find. Think so? No, there's a big chip. See that rat? Yep. That's it. Yeah, it's a tradition. Goes down through the generations of children. If we don't teach them the outdoors, they won't go the outdoors. Like TV, video games.
The region of Hokitika is the place in New Zealand to find jade. For the untrained eye, these thousands of stones all look alike, and the ordinary hiker could pass through here without noticing the rare stone. Dave, however, is always on the lookout.
No, look at that. There. See it? Have a look. What do you think?
And Dave certainly has a sharp eye.
You see how it's grey-white? Hold it, dog. See it, rat? Look at that. See it? Look at that. Look at the green in that. We might make your meaty out of that, eh? What do you reckon? Yep. Feel how heavy that is. I'll hold that. Got it? Pretty heavy, eh? Yeah. Feel it? It's just luck. A lot of luck's involved. The more time you come, the more chance you got to find in the stone. And that's all it is. Luck and time.
Dave loves stones so much, he's surrounded his house with them. But the most surprising thing is out in his shed. This is where he keeps his treasure. 20 years of collecting jade stones. Stones he loves so much, he doesn't even cut them open to see how pure they are. He lets them keep their mystery. His whole fortune and history is contained in these piles of jade stones.
It's a passion. It's a passion. There's browns, greens. The browns are beautiful. These are very, very rare stones. You see the brown crust in those. This is a beautiful Arahura chip. Look at the colour in that. It's marvellous. When I first started, it was for the commercial side of it. I was going to make a lot of money on it. Then I cut a few. I've still got them. I haven't got the money for them. Something grabs you and draws you into the stone. It's not just a Mary thing. It's not just a mouldy thing. It's just the stone. Of course it's a treasure. isn't it? You've been on the river looking for treasures? Yeah, there's another one. So once you cut it, you just turn it into a rock. It's not pounamu. It hasn't got the character. You have to go out, you have to get in the environment and feel the tanga, I think the Māori call it.
Jade has been present in this region since the dawn of time. As a result of geological transformations, jade deposits formed deep within the earth. When the Southern Alps were formed by upthrust just inland of the west coast, the deposits of jade were lifted to the Earth's surface. Much later, the glaciers carried the stones towards the valleys and towards the sea. And when the glaciers began to melt, they deposited these stones in the riverbeds of the west coast. The first Maori to land on this island named it Te Wai Punamu, which means waters of greenstone, or land of jade. This green stone played an essential role in their life. They used it to make jewelry and weapons, and they considered this stone as a link with their ancestors. It had not only material value, but also great spiritual value. Since the arrival of the Maori, a great quantity of jade has been gathered from the rivers and along the beaches. Now, no one knows exactly how much is still left in the rivers. The deposits have been scattered to many different spots. But even today, the Maori have managed to preserve the traditional methods. The jade must always be collected by hand. Dave works in a dairy to feed his family. Milk is New Zealand's white gold. Jade cutting is not his profession, just a side job. And when Dave cuts jade, he works with stones that he buys from other collectors, just so he never has to touch his personal collection. And yet, here, Dave is cutting the stone he has just found in the river. He has a good reason for making this exception today.
This is a gift for my grandson. It's a mere that the Maoris used to use for self-defence when they were first out here. Because the stone is so hard, you can get a fine shape to it and it becomes a good sharp weapon. This will be just for show.
Dave, who has Irish roots, has been a New Zealander for 2 generations. He's interested in the history of this jade that's so important for the Maori.
Let's go, Lono!
When he's not searching the riverbeds, Dave spends his free time with the Kiwis, one of Hokitika's 2 rugby teams.
Relax.
Rugby is a veritable social and cultural phenomenon here. And again, we find the mark of the Maori culture in the haka, the impressive warm-up routine made famous by the All Blacks. For Dave, rugby is like his stones, a fervent passion. He used to play himself. Now he's a trainer / physical therapist and all-round loudmouth for the Kiwis.
Jersey, you play for your club, your jersey. You put it all on the line. All these boys work all week out on the rugby field. That's their time out by themselves. That's the man stuff from when they're little. Yeah, we won. 36-28. We should have got 50. We've still got a bit of work to do. But this is the derby. This is the main game of this round so far. They're the top team. We just took them out.
Dave is a perfect example of what they call here the West Coast spirit. A tough spirit, sometimes a bit rough around the edges, but as genuine as the region itself. Dave has his own secret hunting grounds, and he sometimes has to hike for hours to reach them. This quest for jade is not as obsessive as the gold fever that afflicted thousands of adventurers 150 years ago. But Dave does always feel the irresistible urge to follow the river all the way up to its source in search of that special, rare stone.
There's a piece of rubbish. No colour in it, but it's a bit of stone.
His passion for these stones seems boundless, and no bed of rocks, no matter how large, can dampen his enthusiasm.
This is the Kawaka, but the water runs under the loose rocks, and as you get up round the corner up there, the water's in there, and it must go under the ground and then down and out into the Arahura River. When it's in flood, it's way up on the banks. I found rocks down here, big brown ones, 20 pound, but that's after the flood. We might be a couple of days late, but you don't know. Doesn't matter, does it? Ponamu is a bonus, you know. Don't get me wrong, it's good to find the Ponamu. But, you know, look at it. It's a lovely day. What else would we be doing? You've got to get away from work. Yeah. It's lovely, peaceful.
Just getting to Stewart Island is already an adventure. Whether it's by boat or in the small airplane that makes the connection, the crossing to this region off the coast of South Island is a real expedition. The currents are strong and the ocean is rarely calm, and the winds are as free as the air. Stewart Island is so wild that the first ones to greet the visitor are the albatross. Do they come out of boredom, idle curiosity, or to see if there's some kind of snack for them? A bit of all three, probably. At 47 degrees south, Stewart Island is right in the heart of the roaring 40s. Nobody spends too much time here. Even the clouds seem to be in a hurry. Farhana Ahmad came to live in this wild paradise 14 years ago. She knows a good deal about the wildlife of Stewart Island. She knows the stories that come along with each different plant and tree.
This vine here is called supplejack, and you can see the top. It looks like asparagus, like a head of an asparagus. And Maori used to eat it. They used to break it and eat it, and it tastes like a green bean. And when they couldn't find running water, they used to cut stems of this, break it, and drink the sap. And as the vines became older, like this, Maori used to weave them and make fishing baskets out of them.
Farhana is 47 and has had a rather interesting life. She was born in Kenya. Her father was from India and her mother from the Seychelles. She studied business and geography in England and worked for about 10 years as an accountant in London. Then one day she turned her back on all that and decided to travel.
I came to New Zealand 16 and a half years ago, and I did a lot of hiking from the North Island, South Island and in Stewart Island, and I spent quite a number of years walking by myself in the forest and just watching and listening. Living in New Zealand gives you the encouragement to learn and find out more, so I did a lot of my own research.
After several years of backpacking, Farhana decided to settle on Stewart Island. In fact, she couldn't go any further. Continuing southward, the next stop would have been the Antarctic.
This is what Stewart Island roughly looks like. It's our third largest island. This is the west coast and the southern side, and then the Neck Peninsula, Patterson Inlet. 93% of this island is conservation land. It's in wilderness, it's uninhabited. 5% of Stewart Island around here is Maori land. And Maori arrived in Stewart Island in the 13th century, but they haven't lived here all the time. 2% of Stewart Island, mainly through here, is land available for private ownership, and there's only 28 kilometres of road. There's 750 kilometres of fabulous coastline. It's an amazing place.
Stewart Island is about 65 kilometers by 40, with only 400 inhabitants. And it's not an easy island to get to know. From the air, it's possible to get a view, if you can dodge the downpours and gusts of wind. Coming in from the sea, you're often faced with a rather uninviting coastline. The only way to penetrate this territory is to hike for days and days, being careful not to stray from the paths, for the forest is impenetrable. Here, the vegetation definitely has the upper hand. This vegetation even seems to be gaining ground, waves of branches and roots encroaching on the sea, and not the contrary. This primeval forest is a thick tangle where everything that wants to grow finds a way to thrive. By dint of reading and accumulating knowledge, Farhana has managed to become an expert on her adopted land. She has even made it her job and works as a guide for people who want to discover the region.
This is a beautiful example of a lichen, and a lichen is a plant that's made up of a fungus and an algae. And the fungus makes the structure and the algae helps to make the food. So they grow very, very slowly. You can find this lichen throughout New Zealand. It's very common, and we call it a sample of a foliose leafy lichen. Yeah.
It's hard not to get lost in this maze of vegetation, beaches, and paths. For Hannah knows this island like the back of her hand, yet she feels as if she's learning something new every day.
This plant is called the muttonbird scrub, and it's very soft underneath. It's almost like leather. And the visitors used to write on the back of these leaves. They put a stamp, addressed them, and wrote a note. And the local postmaster would get these leaves, and he used to send them on. The softness of these leaves were favoured by both the Maori and the Europeans. When they went into the forest, they used this as toilet paper, and it worked very well. That's a tui, and the tui is a native New Zealand bird. It's got a beautiful range of songs. It's got 2 vocal cords.
And once again, the roaring 40s are playing their favorite symphony for wind instruments and percussion. For winds blowing in gusts, for winds whistling in the branches. For the squalls that whip up the sea as if urging the waves to play even louder. Stewart Island is an open-air theater where the elements are forever performing the same show, and they hardly ever take a day off. Quite a bizarre spot to live all year round. In summer, there are visitors that come to admire the natural beauty of the island. But in winter, it's another tune. After you've lived in the big cities of Europe, the one and only village of Stewart Island seems like a magical spot at first. Then you have to be able to make a life for yourself there. It seems that wasn't much of a problem for this former Londoner, for Hannah's house is so small we can't even visit it, except from the outside.
This is my wilderness chateau. It's very enjoyable being inside, whether it's a 10-bedroom chateau or a 1-bedroom chateau like mine. When the wind is outside and the rain is outside, inside it's your castle and it's really nice and warm. It's just in here. Oh, yeah. Yes, comfort is in the mind. I've got everything I need for the moment. I can read books, I can visit friends, and I can enjoy the birds in my garden and the plants in my garden. And I have the best duvet that you can buy on the market. So, yeah, I'm warm, I'm happy, and I've got this wonderful forest around me. And I'm being kind to the environment.
For Hannah has turned her back on what she calls the concrete jungle and the rat race, quoting the titles of 2 Bob Marley songs. Here, the jungle is vegetation, and the only racing we witness is that of the sun and the clouds in the sky.
There's some kiwi footprints here on the beach, and the kiwis will feed near the beach or in the forest. And this kiwi has been out early this morning, so we'll try and see if we can find one. A kiwi is a flightless bird. It's one of New Zealand's most ancient birds. and our national icon.
For Hannah can take us to places where nobody else goes. But even so, there are no guarantees of spotting every single animal. And this time, we didn't manage to see any kiwis. This wingless bird is mainly active at night and is very shy. But there's always some curiosity to catch one's interest. You'd imagine them more in Africa, Central America, or in the Amazon. But there are indeed parrots living in these lands far down in the southern hemisphere.
It's one of 3 big parrots in New Zealand. All of these parrots are unique to New Zealand. And the kaka is the forest parrot. This parrot is feeding on the nut from this native tree, which is called miro.
New Zealand's human history is rather brief, and that's surely why natural history is so important to New Zealanders. They have no castles or cathedrals to preserve, but they do have this rich nature to safeguard, and to which they link their history.
This is a rimu, a very young rimu. They take about 500 to 600 years to fully grow. And when Captain Cook and his men sailed around New Zealand's coasts, they used to take the young branches of rimu. They boiled it, added molasses and yeast, and made a beer to stop scurvy. But I don't think it worked.
On Stewart Island, even the birds have their papers. Every year, there are major banding operations organized for certain species, and birds that aren't endemic are not welcome.
Where are you? We are waiting. Ah, Robin, Robin.
For Hannah is a walking encyclopedia of Stewart Island's wildlife. And she has another particularity. She talks to the birds.
Up here. Just there. Like they showed you at the academy. Come on, Robin. The robin likes us because we disturb the ground when we walk, so insects can easily be found. So we call them opportunistic feeders. And the robin is not related to the European robin, but it behaves in a similar way, and its song is very similar. When modern land mammals evolved in the world, they didn't evolve in New Zealand 35 million years ago. And it was only when the Polynesians started to come to New Zealand about 1,000 years ago, and later the Europeans over 200 years ago, that they brought predators for our wildlife. But for millions of years, this country remained without predators. So most of our birds are very friendly.
The privilege of living on Stewart Island also means accepting the drawbacks. A rather restricted social life and rather harsh climatic conditions. For Anna's choice was obvious.
I think the country that you belong to isn't necessarily the country that you were born in or the country that you were brought up in. It's a country that you choose for the things that you value in life. I love the outdoors, I love the natural environment, and for me, this means New Zealand is the right country for me.
So